I am going to call this meeting to order at 5:33. Can I get a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved.
Do you have a motion?
I'd like to move to add the Appropriations Committee reallocation bill to the legislation portion of the agenda.
All right. Would you be willing to retract your motion?
Withdrawn.
Thank you. Do I have a second? All right. Any objections? All right, we will add that. Do I have any motions to add the other two bills that I have that also need to get added to the agenda that I was told about? I think one is the travel awards bill and one is the one that got passed like 15 minutes ago from finance. I need a motion or we're...
So moved.
All right, do I hear a second? Any objections? Okay, that is to add 54 I'm going to say 026 and 54-028. Both of them should already be on Canvas. All right. And with that, do I have a motion to approve the agenda with those edits? All right. Do I have a second? All right. And no objections. Okay, good stuff. We are going to go ahead and get started. So we are going to, technically, we are meant to start with our GPSG Presidential Forum, but we have a guest with us today. So I think we're going to start there and we're going to loop back around. So first I want to invite Lee Roberts, the interim chancellor at UNC. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for everything you're doing to improve student government here at Carolina. I get paid to do this. You all don't. So thank you for contributing your time and your busy schedules to do something you don't have to do, which is try to make it a better school, a better campus, a better university. This is my 4th week on the job. It's been a good 4 weeks so far. I said to the cabinet meeting this morning, I've really been touched at how warm and welcoming and just gracious everyone has been to me. And I met with one person who said, Carolina runs on love. And there's something to that. It's palpable. You can really feel it in the air as you walk around campus. And that's very difficult to create. It's almost impossible to replicate if you lose it. And it's therefore important that we do our best to preserve that feeling of community spirit and care for the institution that in many cases is what makes it function. So I've been trying to get around campus and meet with as many people as possible. I had a great meeting with Lauren the other day. Had a chance to meet her dad at the basketball game on Saturday. I would point out that I am undefeated in the Smith Center since I started on the 12th. And I'm really just trying to, I've met with all the deans, I've met with all the vice chancellors and the vice provosts, and I'm trying to spend time in front of groups like this to hear what's on your mind. Happy to tell you anything I can tell you about what's happening in South Building. I've thought of these first few weeks as obviously a transition period, try to make sure we have a smooth transition. It's unusual to have a leadership transition, obviously in the middle of a school year. So trying to make sure that goes as smoothly as possible. I think it has gone pretty smoothly, thanks to the really good team that we have in the South Building. And now the next step is to start looking at how we can try to make things better. There was a presentation at the cabinet meeting this morning from Beth Mayer Davis about her graduate student experience initiative. And she has a pretty comprehensive and I think thoughtful effort underway in that regard, which I assume all of you are aware of. But I was happy to hear from her about that. I had talked to her about it one-on-one, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you all might have for me about me or about the semester or anything else I can try to answer for you. So thank you again for having me here. I'm delighted to be able to spend time with you.
Thank you for being here, Chancellor Roberts. I wanted to ask about in the state budget passed last year, UNC was allocated, I think, several $1 million for computer science program expansion. Also, I forgot to lead with my name. We're supposed to do that name program. Joshua Bakita Computer Science. And those funds were stated to be for computer science expansion, but I understand a significant portion of them are intended to be used for the data science school. Would you please clarify how we aim to stay true to the purpose of those funds, the stated purpose as approved by the state legislature as we appropriate them to units?
You're implying there's a difference between how we plan to use them and what the stated purpose is?
Perhaps.
Well, you're going to have to enlighten me a little more.
Sure. The specific question I'll say then is how many of those funds are going to make it to the computer science department, as we do deal with a very large major load, very large minor load, and we've had to restrict admissions into our program for years now.
So I'll look into that particular issue. I'm not familiar with it, but I can tell you from a budget standpoint, I did serve as state budget director. I've taught public budgeting for a number of years. We don't have discretion to reallocate funds from how they're appropriated by the legislature. There's when there's legislative intent behind any budget allocation, there are very specific requirements around that. And not only is it written into statute, but it's monitored by the state budget office. In fact, a lot of the day-to-day work done by the state budget office is to make sure that state agencies, including the UNC system, are fulfilling the intent of a legislative appropriation. So again, I'd be happy to look more into that specific question, but if there's an intent behind a legislative appropriation, we have to follow that intent.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Hashim Amir, Economics. Thank you for being here today, Chancellor Roberts. My question is, I don't know if you feel like you're comfortable answering this at this point, but do you intend to apply for the position of Chancellor?
You know, I'm on my 4th week in the job, so one step at a time.
The university recently saw the addition of the School of Civic Life and Leadership, and I think there's been some confusion with folks or students at the School of Government about how that differs from the School of Government. And I think I'm just curious about how you intend to interact with that new school.
So the first part was how it will be different than the School of Government. The second is how I intend to interact with it. So in terms of the difference with the School of Government, first of all, just as an update, I think we have a dean candidate identified for that school, and if the offer letter hasn't gone out, then it will go out imminently. There's been a faculty committee, as you probably know, to identify prospective dean candidates, interview them, and rank them. And as I say, there's an offer going out to the #1 candidate imminently. The School of Civic Life and Leadership really builds on our program for public discourse, and it's designed to build a broad-based curriculum of civics education, classical education, and public discourse. Whereas I think the School of Government, as predominantly a school that is training public officials across the state and beyond. I met with Amy, your dean, a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about her belief that there's not a that their mission is not as well understood as perhaps it could be, that a lot of what they're doing is not necessarily the glamorous but important work of training our county clerks and county commissioners and registrars of deeds and local judges. And obviously there's more that's done there than that, but I think of that as in effect a public administration function curriculum with the School of Public Discourse, as I say, of civic life and leadership, building on the program for public discourse, fairly different focus. As far as how I plan to interact with it, I plan to interact with it the same way I interact with any other school. So the deans report to the provost. In the case of the School of Civic Life and Leadership, at least at the outset here, it's going to be housed within the College of Arts and Sciences. So that dean will actually report to the dean of the college, Jim White, and then to the provost, which is, I think, a good way to start a school. So those will be the reporting lines. Does that answer your question?
It looks like that's loud. Looks like we have one question on Zoom as well, if that's right. Winston, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Chancellor Roberts, for being here. My one question had to do with the recent restrictions in the state budget to the state's matching program for distinguished professorships. Previously, Chancellor Guskowitz had spoken about his intention to still find ways to support faculty in the arts sciences, humanities, or social sciences, I should say. And so I'm curious, in your role as interim chancellor, is there still ongoing conversations with donors and with others to make sure that distinguished professorships are still available and supported within fields that fall outside of the STEM disciplines?
Yeah, does everyone know what the question is referring to? So there was a legislative provision in the last budget that said, right now the state matches private dollars raised for distinguished professorships. And there was a legislative provision that said the state would only continue to do that for distinguished professorships in selected STEM disciplines rather than all disciplines. And so Chancellor Guskowitz committed to making sure that there would be no impact on distinguished professorships here at Carolina. And we're going to be able to fulfill that commitment. We have other sources of funds to fund the distinguished professorships that are affected by the legislation fully without using state dollars. So yes, absolutely is the answer. I'd also add that I think there's probably, you never want to predict what a legislature is going to do, this legislature or any other. They're inherently not particularly predictable, but I do think there is an opportunity to tweak the legislation, perhaps to encompass a greater number of distinguished professorships than the existing legislation encompasses. But the bottom line is it's not going to have any financial impact on us here at Carolina.
Thank you.
I think we're going to have time for one more question, and I saw Kendall on Zoom first. So Kendall, go ahead.
Hi, this is Kendall Winter from Musicology. My question concerns growth that we're seeing on our campus, which is great. I'm wondering if a consequence of that is going to be any shrinkage, programs that will be consolidated or discontinued. My question arises from the recent announced program cuts at UNCG. So I'm just wondering if we should prepare ourselves for something like that on campus and what you'll be doing in your role to prepare us for that, or better, to avoid that.
No, we're growing. Our applications were up 15% this year. We have many more students who want to attend Carolina than we have room for. So I'm not here to cut programs. The situation at UNCG is very different. They're facing, as I think you know, I came from the Board of Governors and chaired the budget committee there. And I have a good degree of familiarity with the situation at UNCG. It's night and day from the situation here. It's a good school, but they're facing significant enrollment challenges that are leading to a series of hard decisions about what they can and can't continue to afford to fund. We have the opposite problems here. All the problems we have are good problems to have. They're problems of growth and high demand. Doesn't mean things can't run more efficiently, particularly on the administrative side. I've heard a lot about how difficult it is to hire or to apply for a grant or to travel, and I've spent enough time in and around state government to know that some of those things are more tractable than others. But I'm not here to be cutting programs. Certainly not academic programs. We have more demand than we can handle.
May I be recognized for a follow-up question? If there's time.
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks. And I know that our enrollment is growing, but as I understand the new state allocation budget, which I recall you were one of the architects of that, enrollment is less of a metric and it's more performance-based. And as I understand it, that has more to do with productivity, degree completion rates, and student debt upon graduation. So with those being considerable metrics for those calculations, how are we doing on our campus to meet those as well?
Yeah, great question. So you're right. There's a new performance funding model that I did help design. I spent 7 or 8 years working on it in fits and starts. It's a remarkably complicated thing to do. And the idea is, I'll try to summarize, under the previous model, so this is the model under which campuses are reimbursed by the system office for their costs. So the system gets an appropriation from the state legislature according to a formula. The system office puts that request into the General Assembly using that same formula. The formula was previously driven entirely by enrollment, as you say. And so the only way that a campus could grow its resources was by growing enrollment. And that had 2 undesirable impacts. One is that for campuses like UNCG, and we have some other regional campuses in parts of the state that are not growing, they were being severely penalized for their decline in enrollment. And secondly, even for campuses that have strong demand, the incentives were misaligned because the only way they could grow their resources was to grow enrollment, regardless of whether that was in alignment with their strategic direction or the strategic direction of the system. And in particular, not to get too detailed, but we were reimbursing based on actual cost per credit hour. So you were incentivized to grow the most expensive programs, the programs that are most expensive to deliver on a per credit hour basis. So you were seeing this proliferation in very expensive programs across the system as a direct result of the fact that that's what we were incentivizing through the funding model. The new funding model still is largely enrollment driven, but at the margin includes this performance component, which, as you say, is driven by these performance metrics that include degree efficiency, time to degree, student debt load. And the purpose of that, first of all, is to align the strategic direction of the campuses more with the strategic direction of the system and of the state as a whole. But second, to give these campuses like UNCG that are suffering from declining enrollment another way to grow their resources without having to grow enrollment. For Carolina, we're in great shape across the board. So we not only have strongly growing enrollment, we're also excelling on all of the performance metrics. In fact, we're doing so well against the performance metrics that I've had a conversation with the system office about whether we need to design other metrics that will have more of an incentive effect. So for example, a percentage of students who graduate on time is one of the metrics. We're already far and away at the highest, this undergraduate degree completion. We're already far and away the best school in the system on that metric. And we're one of the best in the country among large public universities. So there's a limit to how much we can improve our performance on that metric, and therefore it doesn't have much of an incentivization effect. So we're going to have to tweak those metrics, I think, a little bit with the system office, but we haven't done that yet. It's a work in process. Bottom line is we're going to receive a full fund. We did it last year. We'll do it this year. No reason why we shouldn't do it again next year. Receive a full funding allocation on both the performance component and the enrollment component. Sorry for the detailed answer. You obviously asked about a question that's near and dear to my heart.
Awesome. Well, I hope everyone will join me in thanking Chancellor Roberts for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Look forward to coming back again soon.
You're certainly welcome anytime you want to join us again. Let me get the cameras reset here, and then we will continue with our agenda. You got it. Okay. So next we are going to be moving on with our GPSG presidential forum. And so this is going to be an opportunity for the candidates for GPSG president to answer questions, both that were pre-prepared or pre-presented, and also from you all. I made a slide here kind of just explaining how it's going to work. But the two candidates are myself, Katie Heath from biomedical engineering, as well as Benjamin King from public administration. So we can get this started, and facilitating this is going to be our current GPSG president, Lauren Hawkinson.
Thank you, Katie. You both have working mics. Does it?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We're going to do a coin flip first to decide opening statements.
We brought a coin.
Oh,
Cool.
yeah. Your own phone.
You call it.
Sure. Head. I believe you.
I believe.
Okay. All right. So opening statements, we're going to start with candidate Katie Heath. And you will have 90 seconds. I'm going to keep time, and I will let you know if. Oh, yes. Sorry. There is a QR code on the screen. You can use that to scan and type in any questions that you would like asked for our candidates. Sorry, I need to open up the form so that I might need help seeing there. No, never mind. We're good. All right. So without further ado.
All right. Hi, everyone. So my name is Katie Heath. I am a fifth-year PhD student in biomedical engineering, for those of you that have not met me before. And I'm very excited to be up here running for GPSG president. I'm going to kind of start off by talking a little bit about why I decided to run for president in the first place. I think we're in a really unique time right now where GPSG has made a lot of progress this year and has had a lot of success working with the graduate school, working with the administration, and even collaborating with undergraduate students. And the thing that really motivated me to run is I believe we need someone right now who has experience and knowledge about the initiatives that we've already been working on and new initiatives that we are wanting to put in place soon. And I believe that I have that experience as someone who has been a senior vice president this year. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about my specific campaign and my specific platform through questions, but in general, my goal in with my platform is transparency and communication, making sure that GPSG works for all of you just as much as it works for us.
Thank you, Katie. Ben?
First off, thank you, Lauren, for dating this. Folks I haven't had the opportunity to meet, my name is Ben King. I am a first-year MPA student at the School of Government, and I'm running for GPSG president because I love Carolina. I love working with graduate and professional students, and I have a passion for public service. My parents, my mom was a city clerk, my stepdad was a fire chief. Myself, I'm a notary public, volunteer firefighter. I've served on municipal boards and commissions before, so serving others is something that's definitely really important to me. In terms of my experience here on campus, it's been an honor this semester to work here in the GPSG Senate to fight for equitable access to menstrual products across campus, increased engagement with graduate and professional students. And then later tonight, hopefully with y'all's help, I look forward to passing a resolution calling on the university to not hold classes on election day. I'll talk a little more later about some of the things I plan to work on whenever I'm elected. But I just want to thank you all for helping me get to the point where I'm at now, and I look forward to debate in the election.
Thank you, Ben. And Ben, we'll start with you to respond to the first pre-prepared question. So GAs, RAs, and TAs are often required to sign compacts or contracts, which outline their duties outside of being a graduate or professional student. What should be included in these compacts to protect the rights of graduate and professional students? And how should PIs and or advisors be held accountable for adhering to the terms of these compacts?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. First off, we have to make sure that graduate and professional students know what their rights are when it comes to signing these contracts for assistantships. I've talked to several other students across campus, and right now it doesn't seem like many folks really understand what it is exactly they're signing when they're signing these contracts or compacts. And one way we can work on fixing this is running an education campaign to help graduate and professional students know what their rights are and know what their courses of action are as it relates to the contracts they've signed. Secondly, doesn't look like there's much consistency across the board from school to school. Someone who has an assistantship in the public administration program might have a contract that looks very different from someone in computer science or toxicology. So my second point would be that we need to have some consistency across the board from school to school to have a baseline of expectations.
Thank you, Katie.
I think this is a really good question, and it's something that I have spent a lot of time thinking about in the past year. So a couple of specific things that I think stick out to me immediately. It is unclear about a lot between departments. What is the appropriate amount of work time? What is the appropriate amount of time off and vacation time that graduate students get? Graduate students do not know how wellness days work for us. It's sort of an unspoken mystery. A few other things, I think pay can be unclear for, I've seen examples of people discuss where they're unclear about if their pay is for 12 months or 9 months or how their pay schedule is going to be. There's a lot of specifics that I think are important for people to have in order to make educated decisions about attending Carolina. Now, I think when we talk about sort of what is the accountability for this, right? Right now, for most departments, the accountability structure is you go to your PI or you go to your advisor and you talk to them about the issue that you might be having. And if that doesn't work, you try to elevate it in your department. Maybe you go to your director of graduate studies or the chair of your department. I believe that that system is inherently flawed because of the concern for retaliation, because some of y'all's departments are teeny tiny and everyone knows each other. And whether or not this is actually something occurring, there is always a fear that you cannot get accountability for.
That's time. All right, second question, Katie, we'll start with you. Over the course of the next year, there is the potential for graduate student health insurance to undergo some major changes, positive or negative. What are the greatest issues facing graduate students with regard to healthcare coverage, and how do you plan to advocate for those?
Sure. I know health coverage has definitely been on everybody's mind lately. So I think specific things that we need to advocate for are maintaining our great low deductible plans that we have. We need to maintain coverage that covers family members for those that have significant others or dependents. We need to make sure that we don't lose coverage for the mental health services that we have, for the gender affirming care that we have access to right now, and for preventative care that we have. And all of those things are going to take advocacy. I sort of see three big things that we need to do in order to maintain, our foot in the door. One is we need to make sure we show up and are present in the rooms where those conversations are happening. We need to continue to work with contacts that we have, like Ken Pittman at Student Health, who is great and absolutely is going to be an advocate for us. And lastly, I think we just need to make a lot of noise about this, because as long as they know that we care, they will listen to us.
Thank you, Katie. Ben?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question that's been on a lot of people's minds. Of course, the biggest issue here is the shift from the university-funded health insurance to the self-funded model. Like Katie said, I want to thank Ken Pittman for being so involved in the process and for speaking at our last meeting last month. I think this comes down to three core issues. We've got overlapping eligibility with Medicaid due to Medicaid expansion in the General Assembly. Mr. Pittman talked about this a little bit, but it seems like there's some concern among students who may choose to enroll in Medicaid. Secondly, we haven't seen a concrete guarantee from the university that down the road eligibility for the self-funded plan will remain the same. So I think folks are concerned about remaining eligible down the road. And then lastly, this is sort of a broad point, but I want to make sure that with the new student health insurance plan, we're making sure that ADA accommodations are being fulfilled and that marginalized communities have access to equitable healthcare coverage. And then one of my big things, if elected, I want to create a new cabinet position, Director of Student Insurance Programs, to make sure that we've got someone working on this nonstop. And down the road, if we decide that that's not a position we need anymore, then that's something we could move away from. But that's something I want to definitely move towards.
Thanks, Ben. And we'll start off with you for this third question. Graduate and professional students are struggling more and more each year to find affordable housing options. In your opinion, what are some viable options to address the lack of affordable housing for graduate and professional students in this area?
Yeah, so I think affordable housing is something all of us in this room have definitely dealt with. I know I have. In my opinion, this is a town issue. It's something that we can use our voice to advocate for, but we're going to have to work with Chapel Hill and Carrboro Town Councils to make sure that affordable housing is something that's made a priority. I know that a majority of the newly elected council members in Chapel Hill and Carrboro campaigned on affordable housing, so I think they would be supportive in working with us to try and find a solution. Personally, I've served on municipal boards and commissions in the past, so I know what it's like to interact with government when it comes to some of these sticky situations. I'm not afraid to work with council and show up to meetings, use my voice to advocate for affordable housing for graduate and professional students. Next, we've got to make sure that we're continuing to use the off-campus housing guides that we've been publishing past couple of years. I think those are a really good resource for graduate and professional students, but we've got to make sure that we're making sure that students know what it is and how to use it and that they have access to it. And then lastly, I want to make sure that we're utilizing our cabinet officers in an effective manner. The Director of Local Relations, currently it's Michael Beauregard, who's a public administration student, is the current Director of Local Relations. But an idea I have is that that director should be required to attend 2 municipal board meetings in the area per semester to convey what GPSG is doing to address issues in our community. And then likewise, the Director of Local Relations should report back.
That's time. Katie, go ahead.
Well, absolutely. To start off with, I will reiterate everything that Senator King says. Absolutely, continuing to advocate and communicate with the city of Chapel Hill because it is a Chapel Hill problem, the lack of affordable housing. And I think the fact that hopefully we have some really great relationships and connections with members on the Chapel Hill Council is going to be really great. A couple of things on top of that that I also want to add. One is that I think we need to continue to advocate with the university for graduate student housing on campus. I know that there is a plan, I believe, to convert the current graduate student housing to undergraduate housing and then potentially build additional graduate student housing elsewhere. We need to continue to work with the administration so that they understand that that is a priority to be able, so that students have access to affordable on-campus housing. Additionally, I think I'm just gonna say parking. We need to do some stuff with parking. I think if a student is able to find affordable housing further away from campus, but then they can't easily and effectively commute to campus from that further away place, that is just continuing to swipe away at the possible options that they might have for affordable housing.
Thank you. And last prepared question, start with Katie again. Graduate and professional student wellness has been a focus of this administration, and a comprehensive campus-wide task force has been created to address graduate and professional student wellness needs. You heard Interim Chancellor Roberts allude to that. It's called the Graduate Student Experience Initiative. I've mentioned it a couple times in Senate meetings over the last couple months, and hopefully Dean Mayor Davis will be here next month to talk about it in more detail. The GPSG president will sit on the steering committee for this task force for the foreseeable future. How will you continue to advocate for graduate and professional students on this topic?
This is a big question and there's a lot I could say here. So I will try to summarize it quickly. I think first, I think we can really break down wellness into three things. I think it's resources available to students. I think it's access to community at Carolina. And I think it is them having equitable access to workers' rights so that they actually have the time and the energy to find those resources and find that community. So I think in terms of working with this graduate school committee, I think I have a couple of ideas. One is an idea that I came up with last summer that you might have heard of, the Graduate Bill of Rights, which is going to be a document that is going to list the rights that students, graduate and professional students will have, student workers, that are things like we talked about before. I think we need to continue to listen to the needs of the students. I think we had some really great advocacy come out of the chemistry department this year in terms of the embedded counselor program. And also there was the postdoc, Laura, who did some great work this year. And so I think that advocacy is going to be being a funnel for the needs and the asks of graduate and professional students across campus and bringing that to the graduate school so they know what it is that students actually need.
Thank you. Ben?
Sure. First off, I want to thank the current administration for the work they've done on wellness. I think a good start to advocating for wellness is by continuing to hold events like we saw today with the Graduate Student Wellness Festival. I think that was really well received by students. I know a number of us in here were there today. And then whenever I'm elected, I look forward to working with the Director of Health and Wellness and the graduate school to continue to plan similar events. Secondly, this is a really big issue. We have to make sure that we're prioritizing wellness days. And we have to make sure that wellness days are actually wellness days. We got to make sure we're holding professors accountable when it comes to these. I've been working with another senator, Riley Stahl, on writing a resolution calling on the university to prevent professors from making assignments due on wellness days. I've spoken to several grad students who still had assignments to submit the night of or in the days following the deadly shooting our campus experienced last semester. So I'm looking forward to sending that resolution to the SOGAPS committee in the near future and working with the Senate to get it passed. And then in terms of wellness in general, I think it'd be a mistake for me not to bring up the menstrual product resolution that I helped pass at our last month's meeting. We've got to continue to put pressure on university leadership to make sure that folks on campus that need menstrual products have equitable access to them. And if I'm elected, I'll continue to advocate for this important issue with the Chancellor's Office and the Director of Campus Health.
That's time. So now we are going to move into questions from the audience. And I will start with Ben here. How do you plan to work with Interim Chancellor Roberts and our new university leader during your term? And which initiatives would you like to continue and which would you want to start?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's something I've been thinking about. I think there was some sort of animosity between a lot of students whenever we first found out who the interim chancellor was going to be. But personally, I've decided to give the interim chancellor a break, give him a chance to prove himself. He seems like he's settling in a position well, and I'd look forward to working with him. I'd want to keep working on some of the issues I've already talked about, but another thing that is sort of a concrete thing we could work on that was done in the past is increase assistantship stipends. I think it was Theodore Noller 2 years ago. I think it was a $3,000 increase in stipends. That's just one of the programs that I'd like to work with the chancellor's office on.
Thank you. Katie?
So I'm very much looking forward at the opportunity to work with the new administration. I think that the things I've seen about their general excitement about working with us and collaborating with us is very promising, and I really want to continue to do that work. I think it's important to be in constant communication, to be constantly following up and making sure that we are being as clear as possible about the fact that we belong in every room and in every decision, because we make up a third of the student body. And I think that's really important and something that we will have to continue to remind the administration. I think in terms of specific program I would want to start, I think would be, this is actually something that I think is similar to what Senator King said, but I really think we need to start the discussion about continuous stipend increases, yearly regular stipend increases, because I don't believe that individual yearly stipend increases are going to help us get to the point of reaching that cost of living for graduate and professional students. We are at like a $20,000 a year difference between the minimum stipend for PhD students on campus and what the actual cost of attendance is. So I think that that is absolutely something, a priority for me in terms of working with this new administration.
Thank you. And kind of going you off of that, you both mentioned stipends would be something that you would want to work with the new chancellor on. In some departments, the increase in the minimum stipend led to an increase in the teaching responsibilities. How would you prevent such unintended consequences in the future? Katie?
I think this, I'm going to say Bill of Rights a bunch of times, but I think that this really does go back to that concept of clearly defining what are the responsibilities of a graduate or professional student or of a student worker. For example, a TA in one department might be required in order to get their stipend to assist a singular professor for a certain number of hours a week in grading papers and in holding labs. And in another department, they might be required to be an instructor of record for 2 courses and teaching hundreds of students. And there is no clarity. It is very much just a department's sort of get to make that decision. And there is no clarity on what is the actual expectation. And I'm hoping that by defining those things, we will be able to have something to show to each department and say, hey, you're not doing this. Why are you not doing this? And how can we make this more equitable for all students across campus?
Thank you. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I'll echo what Katie said. We've got to have consistency from graduate school to graduate school. It's understandable that someone in public administration is going to be doing something related to government, and someone in biology is going to be doing something related to biology. But it's not understandable that folks are putting in different hours of work and getting paid differently. And so I look forward to working with the Senate, the cabinet, anyone that's willing to help get this issue resolved to make sure that folks that are working on campus are being paid in a commensurate manner.
Thank you. And Ben, we'll start with you for this one. What's your biggest concern or worry about the graduate and professional student experience at Carolina?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the interim chancellor kind of spoke on it earlier, and Kendall sort of hinted at it. We got to make sure that enrollment is something we keep an eye on. We're the best public institution in the world, in my opinion. And so, of course, folks are going to want to come here for grad school to get their masters and PhDs. So we've got to make sure that we're being equitable in terms of admissions. The Supreme Court case several months ago really did a number on us in terms of making sure that we're admitting folks in an equitable manner. So the school is going to really have to focus on how are we admitting folks and deciding who gets to come to Carolina while still making sure that it's done in an equitable manner.
Thank you. Katie?
Yeah, when I think about what is sort of the biggest blanket issue that I see facing graduate professional students and their experience at Carolina, I really believe it is that many students here struggle to find where they belong. They do not feel like Carolina is made for them. They feel like Carolina is a place where they work, and it is a place where there are programs that maybe are available to other students, but it is not a place for them. I think that this is, I think this has been exacerbated by the pandemic and us continuing to try to recover from that. But I think that there's a lot of things as GPSG that we can do to try to work on this problem. I think we really need to do a better job of working with our collaborators to, take advantage of the resources that they have. I think a great example is like the Carolina Union Activities Board. They have a ton of money and a lot of opportunity to do a lot of really great events, but we don't do a very good job working with them to help them understand what it is that graduate students want out of an event or a community experience. I also think continuing to support graduate and professional student specific student organizations is really important, and I think it's not something that we put enough emphasis on. And just in general, working to make sure that if there is a student that's on this campus that is looking and is searching for something, that we can be a resource for them to help them find where they belong.
Thank you. Since you both touched a little bit on diversity and inclusion in your answers, how will you hold the chancellor and administration and other administrators at UNC accountable for prioritizing inclusion and equity, specifically LGBTQ and students of color, which the NC legislature is actively targeting? So, Katie.
Yeah, I think this is a difficult question, and this is unfortunately a difficult problem that is a very real problem that we are faced right now. I think that the first thing is we absolutely need to continue to work very closely with the different centers across Carolina. So the LGBTQ center, we have a women's center. There's a lot, I won't list all of them here, but I think working with all of those different groups of people that are doing really great advocacy work and uplifting the work that they're doing, because we have a direct voice, right, to the administration and making sure that we are saying the same things. I think also continuing to be a place that shares resources and is giving access to students for when they need help or when they feel like they are not having the experience that they expect, or making sure that we can give them access to places to go for those things. And then I think the other thing is being really annoying to the administration. I think it is, we need to constantly be reminding them about these priorities that we have about that. We think DEI is very important. We think that having Carolina that is represented by many, many, many different types of people is a priority to us, and make sure that they know it, because if we are not silent, then they cannot ignore us.
Thank you. Ben?
What Katie said in her previous question, I think would apply to this question. So I'll commend her in that. And that making sure that folks know that they belong at Carolina and that there is a place for them. In my opinion, Carolina is a place for all. We've got to make sure that folks know about identity groups on campus. I'll give a quick example. At the School of Government, we have, I think, 47 students on campus. That's a fairly small program. And so there's some folks that come from some marginalized backgrounds that that sometimes didn't feel like they were included or didn't have a place where they could feel comfortable at the School of Government. And so the School of Government has really done a good job of emphasizing that there are identity groups on campus. And I want to make sure that we're partnering with the schools and the graduate school to make sure that folks know that there is a group on campus, there's somewhere on campus where they can find people that are like them, where they can feel safe and that feel like they have a place here on campus.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Ben, for this next question. You've both talked a lot about how you will use your executive branch and cabinet. How will you use the Senate in your administration?
Yeah, so I love legislative politics. That's like my thing. So I would look forward to working with the Senate to continue to pass resolutions and bills that further the goals of my administration. Of course, I won't be on the floor, but I look forward to continuing to use the partnerships that I've forged in the Senate now to be able to continue those initiatives. I think we've got to use sort of the bully pulpit of the Senate, passing resolutions that sort of get in the face of university leadership and let them know that these are items that are important to us. So yeah, I just continue to do what I'm doing now, but just from the sidelines.
Thank you. Katie?
You know, I've had a really incredible experience working as senior vice president and working with the Senate this year. And so I do think I sort of have a special bird's eye view right now of the way that Senate works. And I think the capabilities that the Senate has. And one thing I really would like to work more towards next year is continuing to use our committees as sort of working groups for the initiatives that we talk about. I think we have so much people power in this room and so many people with so many ideas. And I think that we have Senate committees, we have the ability to create additional ad hoc committees to work on all of these initiatives that I've talked about, because I'm not going to be able to do all of it myself, of course. And so taking more advantage of all of those committees and taking advantage of all of the powers that Senate has to function like a working group, to function, to be the steam behind the engine, right? I think is something that I would really like to see happen more next year.
Thank you. And Katie, we'll start with you for this question. What initiative or opportunity are you looking forward to that you feel you cannot accomplish as a senator or cabinet member?
This is an interesting question. You know, I think that absolutely the unique thing about being president is that you are sort of automatically afforded a seat at a lot of tables, right? And so this position, one of the biggest things that you do is you are an advocate. And so I think one thing I would really like to do as president that I sort of wouldn't be able to do in this position is advocate for some of the initiatives that we have directly to different groups of people. So for an example, the Student Bill of Rights that I've talked about a bunch, I would really like to be able to go to the faculty senate, to be able to go to the undergraduate senate, to be able to go to the administration and sit with all of these administrators and all of these people and say, hey, will you look at the Student Bill of Rights? Let's decide together what this should look like so that it is something that can be ratified by all of these groups and actually taken up by the university as sort of official policy. I think that there's a lot of examples of that in terms of initiatives where, you know, I will sort of be afforded a seat in the table. And so we'll be able to bring all of these things that we care about to all of these different groups.
Thank you. Ben?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. For me, I want to put period products in every bathroom across campus. I've done the work on this end in the Senate, and as president, I would continue to use my voice to advocate for that in the rooms that sometimes we're not allowed in as senators. Like Katie said, we've got to continue to advocate for the issues we care about, and that's an issue I care about a lot. And so I would just continue to carry the momentum to have equitable access to menstrual products across campus.
Thank you. This will be our last question before closing statements, and I apologize that I was not able to get to all of the questions. I hope there was enough variance in the questions that were asked, and I'm sure our candidates would be happy to speak with you afterwards if you have additional questions. So I think we're It's on you, right, Ben, to start? Okay, so outside of GPSG, how do you serve the community?
Yeah, I kind of talked about this earlier, but community is something that's really important to me. I'm an active member of my church, civic organizations. I just joined a volunteer fire department. I've served on municipal, back in Salisbury, where I'm from, I served on the City of Salisbury Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, which worked with council and the manager's office as sort of a liaison to further the initiatives of the Parks and Rec Department. I love serving the community. I grew up in City Hall and the fire station. So serving others is just something that I've grown up around, and it's something that I care a lot about. And I would look forward to continuing to serve the Carolina community as president.
Thank you. Katie?
Carolina is definitely my home. I have been here for a really long time. It feels like at this point, I think now I'm in my 5th year now. And, I think that serving my community has been absolutely the most rewarding and the most important thing that has happened to me since I've been in graduate school. An example, I currently serve as the co-president for the Graduate Student Association for the Biomedical Engineering Department, which is a joint department between UNC and NC State. And so I spend a lot of time there. I attend faculty meetings. I have meetings specifically with our director of graduate studies. I do a lot of basically student advocacy in that job, in that role. And I also have done a lot of work sort of just to generally build the community within that department, which has been something that I've been very, very happy with, and has been a very good experience that I think has definitely helped sort of inform my thoughts and opinions on community and finding community at Carolina. But I will say, I think that absolutely this is the most rewarding thing that I have been able to do since I've been a graduate student, and I look forward to continuing it next year.
Thank you. And we'll move into closing statements. So Katie, go ahead.
All right. So thank you all so much for being here and for listening to us ramble on about our policy. There's a couple things I want to touch on, maybe that just I didn't get to during some of the questions, that are things that additionally I would like to do as president. One is I really want to have a big focus next year on transparency in GPSG. I think GPSG is confusing and inaccessible to most graduate and professional students. It is very hard to use our services and use our resources. And so that's something I really want to prioritize next year. And also, I really want to prioritize collaboration with many different groups on campus. I think it's been really amazing to see the great collaboration that Lauren has been able to have with Chris, who's our current student body president, and is something that I really hope to continue next year. All in all, I really am excited to hear more from everyone in this room. I think that there are a lot of different issues affecting graduate and professional students right now, and I don't certainly know everything, and I imagine anyone in this position would know everything. So I'm excited to talk to you all more and hear about the things that you're thinking and the things that you want to see changed. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Katie. Ben?
Like Katie said, first off, I want to thank the folks that took the time out of their day to come out and listen to what each of the candidates had to say. It looks like there's some folks in the room that maybe aren't in the Senate. So I want to thank y'all for coming out and for caring about GPSG. I'll be pretty brief. I'll just finish by saying that I don't think that there's necessarily a right or wrong choice in this election. This election is about what issues do you want to see prioritized. But at the end of the day, I think between Katie and I think GPSG is going to be just fine. But yeah, I'm really excited about the opportunity to be able to serve Carolina in another way. And like Lauren said, if anyone has any questions that maybe we didn't get to during the forum, I'm more than happy to answer them afterwards.
Thank you, Ben. Let's have a round of applause for both of our candidates.
All right. Let's keep going. We have one more invited speaker tonight who is joining us, Chris, who's from the Association of Student Governments. That is what ASG stands for, right? Is Association of Student Governments. That is okay. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't Google that ahead of time. Chris serves as the chair of government outreach and is going to speak to us a little bit. Change the slides like this so they should be in there.
Sorry. Thank you all for inviting me to speak today. I'll be pretty brief. It's kind of hard to follow that debate, and the chancellor, I guess, he's a very engaging speaker. So is anybody familiar with what ASG is? Were you in student government in your undergrad if you went to a UNC system school? No hands in the audience. So essentially, ASG is the Association of Student Governments. If you're familiar with the UNC system is, it's the 17 public institutions for North Carolina. All the student governments come together and they're kind of an advocacy board before the Board of Governors. So I'm here to speak about Advocacy Day. Every year, ASG puts on an Advocacy Day. At the state legislature, we invite students to come speak. We also advocate on behalf of initiatives that are personal to our campus, as well as a broader advocacy message. So I'll get into that a little bit. But like I said, what is ASG? Associated Student Governments organization designed to represent the interests of students and deliberations of the UNC Board of Governors. So I'll go into that in a bit, into a second here. But the purpose, as I said, collective best interest for what the UNC system wants on a student basis. So who's our leadership? We're in our 54th session right now. Our president is Stephanie. She sits on the Board of Governors as a non-voting member. So she's at every BOG meeting and she reports back. She also gets a voice at the table. So although she can't vote, something that ASG has been trying to change for 54 years now, she still has a voice. And our senior vice president is Jameer Hamlin. Stephanie goes to Western Carolina, Jameer goes to NC Central. We have a lot of diversity across the board in terms of where student leaders are coming from who are on the executive board. I'm on Chapel Hill. So what is Advocacy Day? Like I said, every year ASG hosts Advocacy Day in coordination with the state relations staff at Chapel Hill, Western Carolina Central, all the UNC system schools, as well as the UNC system office, to advocate, like I said, for a specific initiative. So a big one that we're trying to advocate for this year is appropriations funding, specifically for a sexy infrastructure. Isn't that sexy? No heating in your building. Isn't that sexy? Leaking roofs. Isn't that sexy? So that's what a big thing we're going to come to ASG, to the NC General Assembly this year to advocate for, as well as DEI initiatives, more mental health funding. We've gotten a lot from ARPA funding and other federal stimulus packages that have been sent to the governor's office, that have been sent to the individual schools in the UNC system. But that's just a few of the things. Every year we create a legislative priority list working with all these state relations staff. But now is the time we get to actually put that into practice when we come speak to these legislators. So a little bit of the logistics. Delegations total about 5 students each. This year we had planned to do a poster session with graduate students from across the system to come speak with their legislators, present their research on present their research on behalf of their institution, themselves, their program, to their legislators and the Board of Governors. But because of some scheduling conflicts, it just didn't make it this year. But we want to have delegations that include graduate students. So the deadline has passed to get in on it, but I am here and I make the deadline. So if any of you want to be a part of Advocacy Day, please come speak to me or to Lauren. She'll send that to me and I'll give you that information. But total is about 5 students from every campus. They make appointments with their elected officials, advocate on behalf of things I've kind of been saying. FAQ, this year it's going to be February 28th. That's my email, my ASG email, not my UNC email. If you want to learn more about ASG, uncasg.org. And like I said, if you want to be a part of it, you can reach out to me or Lauren. These 2 images on the screen are just examples of like how we get into contact. We provide all the resources for you to get in contact with your elected official. So I think the one on top is the template that we use when we email out to everybody. And then below is the list of all the legislators' contact information, as well as their LAs that we put together. But if there's any quick questions anybody wants answered, I'm happy to do so. Try to be brief. I'm counting to 8 in my head. I'm almost there. Yes.
What are y'all doing to encourage other campuses to better have representation from grad students? Since there are currently only 3 graduate student reps out of all the many schools of the system.
Yeah. So we have within ASG, there is a graduate student representative on the executive board. I forget what the title is, but their goal is to organize graduate student organizations. So GPSG here, I know when I went to UNCG for undergrad, it was just GSA, Graduate Student Association. We kind of fell behind this year just because of scheduling conflicts of actually getting graduate students from these other campuses involved, like I said, with the poster session and with the actual advocacy, which is why we're trying to still do that now. It's hard to say for specific graduate student associations on these campuses. Like you said, there's about 3. I think this is what you're referring to, specific organizations. You know, ASG doesn't have much control over that. It's more on the individual campus level of do those students want to charter a new organization for their graduate students to have them represent them in that manner. But from the ASG perspective, they have that representation. I will say maybe ASG doesn't do well enough to get the message out that this is an organization that exists, because frequently the graduate student meeting, when it's held every month, I think next week we're having a meeting virtually at UNCG. We do go in person to all the campuses for meetings, but we do have virtual meetings as well. But to get back to the point, the graduate student committee is frequently empty or full of undergraduates. So if you have friends at UNC system institutions who are also graduate students, I would encourage them to attend this virtual meeting to let their voice be heard in that manner. There's nothing we could do about the individual campus level if there's no student organization for graduate students, but at the system level, we have that advocacy avenue there. It's just not being utilized, and maybe that's a bit on us. Any other questions? 5, 6, 7, 8. I counted 8. I see none. I think we are done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, I know it's tight up here. Okie dokie. We are almost done with pre-stuff. Before we get into legislation, we are going to move into open forum, and I do believe Matthew Tweeden, who is the chair of JGC, is going to come and speak for not very much time hopefully about JGC, just a couple of minutes, preferably.
Great, thank you, Katie. Hi all, I know I've had the chance to meet with probably about half of y'all in some form or another between committee meetings over the past few years, chatting at GPS Senate meetings, etc. But my name is Matthew Tweeden. I am a third-year undergraduate student studying public policy, and for the last 2 years, I have served as chair of the Joint Governance Council. So you may notice UNC is really unique in the fact that we have a full and robust graduate student government parallel to our undergraduate student government. But only 1 seat on the board of trustees, as has been a source of much frustration over the years. So how do we allocate that? It goes to our student body president, and we have a number of shared fees that are co-governed. There are enough of these institutions that are double dipped between our 2 constituencies that there's a special system to administer them called joint governance. The Joint Governance Council is sort of the centerpiece of this system, primarily serving as a legislative function. So whenever we pass constitutional amendments or joint code revisions, or even, for example, last month with the menstrual product resolution, something that we just feel affects the entirety of the student body and should be elevated to that level to sort of speak with the one voice of student government. It's sent for consideration to the Joint Governance Council. So it's comprised of 6 members on each side: your president, VP, senior VP, VP finance, and 3 of your Senate committee chairs. We meet every other week. So I'm happy to field any questions y'all may have about the Joint Governance Council or about any of our joint institutions that we interface with, RESPC, SSSC, CAA, RHA, anything is sort of in that domain, as well as talking just big picture governance issues. If there's any questions I can answer or information I can help provide. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. We are now going to move into the selection of vacant standing committee members. We have 2 committees that both have 1 vacancy. The Finance Committee and the Rules and Judiciary Committee, I would like to call for potentially self-nominations for individuals who would like to join one of those committees. So I will take a moment and hold for any nominations for people who want to join. You have to be a senator, by the way. But I like the enthusiasm. Anyone on Zoom? All right, we will keep doing this until we find someone. Okay, we are now going to start with legislation. We have a bunch today. So we're going to start with 54-005, an act to stimulate senator constituent communication and socialization through early unit town halls. If you'll give me just a moment so that I can get this up on the screen, but if Kendall, if you want to go ahead and begin introducing the bill, feel free.
Hello, Kendall Winter Musicology. I am the author and sponsor of this bill, which you have now seen twice before. In its new and improved form, we've changed the bill so that, and this has changed it in consultation with senators who came to that special session that we had in November. It was like a talking feedback session about it. But the new upshot would be that this bill proposes now to require that senators host their town hall within 90 days of the first meeting of the Senate, or for those senators who are elected by special election, within 90 days of the first meeting after they are seated as a senator. Okay, so it doesn't propose that we have or it doesn't require that we have two town halls. We passed a bill 2 meetings ago, I think now at this point, that incentivized hosting a second town hall annually, but did not require it. For anyone who has been reading the bill online in advance, what you're seeing with the highlighting is the things that are different from the last time we all saw this bill, I think in October. That's all I got this time, I think, but I'll happily take questions if there are any. Or motions.
All right, we'll move to discussion. Go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, Samantha Beck from BBSP. So my unit, we are for all first year students. And do you have any exceptions that you're thinking of, or any way to really aid those like my group who were barely even at UNC for for even 30 days before we're elected to this position, and are really still learning UNC and learning GPSG? How would we be beneficial for our constituents if we have to hold the town hall within 90 days?
That's a great question. So what already exists outside of this bill are a series of like templates online. If you decided that you wanted to have like a PowerPoint presentation, or if you need an agenda template or a minutes template, those are all available on our Canvas site. We also in the GPSG have made a habit of hosting a town hall orientation type event, which we anticipate will happen again next year. That will help the senators, new senators especially, to familiarize themselves with town halls. Town halls sound a lot scarier than they really are. It's just a space for you to introduce yourself to your constituents and make yourself known as a resource for them. Even if you don't know everything that the GPSG can do for them, for your constituents to know that you're the person who will connect them with, funding opportunities, with social activities, with advocacy priorities. The chain is kind of, constituents have a senator, the senator has the president pro tempore and the SVP, and from there it branches out to the entire GPSG. So you're just kind of a link in that chain, and this effort is to ensure that constituents know who their link is early enough in their program for it to be useful for them. Because as you say, first year students are often kind of like awash with all of this new information, and knowing that they've got a student ally who can help connect them to things is the purpose of that. And it's better to try to do that in October or November rather than March, which is traditionally what's been happening. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, and point of information, I just want to clarify too, because I wasn't sure if this is clear. This bill is requiring the town halls within 90 days of the first Senate meeting, not 90 days from the beginning of the semester or like election. It's from the first Senate meeting, which usually will happen in the second week of September. So that would put you at October, November, December. So basically in either September, October, November, or a little bit of December is where that falls. Go ahead.
I do want to mention, just going back over my own calendar, that town hall planning meeting wasn't until November 15th this year, which would not give you very much time to plan one before that December-ish deadline.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. In the past, we've actually had the town hall orientation be a priority for the summer governance, so that they're laying the groundwork so that that event can happen earlier. Although this year, and I served on summer governance this year, we were in the April Senate meeting of last year tasked with other things that we needed to work on. Namely, we needed to work on allocations and travel awards. Oh, and updating a lot of those town hall materials that I spoke about earlier. So thank you for the feedback. And yes, obviously the town hall orientation meeting should happen earlier in future years.
Yeah, also add another point of information there. It is now recorded. So we now have a video.
True.
So anyone can watch it anytime it's public on our YouTube channel. I did want to mention that, but I'll also say, because I think that is kind of I was the one that organized it. I absolutely think it needs to happen earlier. And it was just sort of a matter of, we're working on making better transition materials so that we know when that is supposed to happen. So I think, I don't think we should prevent solving one problem because we have another problem. You know what I mean? So, but that's just my own personal comment. Are there any other questions about this bill from anyone? I see in the back. Go ahead.
Hi, Brittany Alcera from Biochem Biophysics. I just wanted to add a point of clarification as the former BBSP senator. So it is a class of like 100 and something students coming in from all over the country. And even this round around, I did take the initiative to go ahead and help familiarize Samantha and the other senator. But it was like, I even had to reach out and say, hey, can they even view to see what this looks like? And I know you guys had to do some communication on the back end because it is very, very new. So from their perspective, I can agree, like it is a lot and they don't even know, along with everything else that is required from this program during their first year, their first months, or even weeks, I would say, it is a lot for students to be able to even know what their needs are and then to stand in front of their constituents and try to voice for them. So I don't know if there could be maybe a liaison for scenarios like this or a special, I guess, I don't know, like different, like a different, not a different set of rules, but some type of compensation for students that are first years coming into something very, very new without any background of even what this entails or even what this campus entails in general.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback. Compensation is something that is dealt with in the finance committee. So that is something that I can't do with this bill right now. But I hear you. I think that makes a lot of sense. And perhaps what we need to do, and what I know Katie and I last summer when we worked on summer governance together, hoped to, and last year when we worked on SOGAPs together, actually, we hoped to really establish a GPSG alumni contact sheet so that as senators graduate, we can, with their permission, pass down their contact information to people who succeed them in their roles. Because as you say, there is a little bit of a lag between when a new senator is elected and when the VP for communications is able to update all of our listservs and give people access to things like our Canvas site where all of these things are stored, as a sort of Band-Aid to that, and to perhaps, as you say, mentor people through the process of becoming familiar with the role of senator. Having that that contact sheet for GPSG alumni would be really helpful for us to ease that burden on new senators.
Well, also, I did not mean like compensation in terms of monetary. I was just saying like another way just to help those students in being able to transition, or even just getting familiar with what they're getting into before having to jump into elections in September. Because I think even in September, I think they're just even like making decisions on rotations and stuff like that. So that was what I meant. Mm-hmm.
Are there other questions about the bill? Oh, Joshua, sorry, I didn't see you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Katie. This is Joshua Bakita, Computer Science. Kendall, have you considered, to address the concern that was just raised, putting in place a process where senators can appeal to have more time as there is an appeal process for attendance? If you miss the attendance requirements, you can, I think, appeal to one of the committees to have that waived. Have you considered something like that here?
It's not written into the bill as presented to you all right now, but I think that's something that would be beneficial to introduce in future legislation. I'd be happy to work with you on something like that, because I do think the appeals process that we have for attendance would make sense in a case like this. And I feel like the attendance appeals process is currently underutilized, so I don't think it would be such a huge burden on the committee to create that additional pathway for senators to be appealing in cases where their event isn't happening in the fall semester.
Right, I'll come back to you. I have another hand here. Nicholas, go ahead.
Hi, Nick Melosi, Health Policy Management. Senator Winters, I'm curious as why you feel the need that it needs to be required versus having just an incentive to have this in the fall. Do you think it would be better to just have it as an incentive to hold it in the fall versus requiring it or mandating it?
So I guess my perspective on it is to say, yes, I do think we should require it in the fall. And I say that because of where the bill was originally written and where it's come to at this point, right? Like the strategic plan says that we should move in the direction of having 2 required town halls per academic year, because that is what constituents told us when we asked them what they wanted. So that is what I brought to the Senate in September, and it was not well received. So I revised it. It was not well received in October. It has been revised again. And so at this point, I feel like we have to start moving in the direction of our strategic plan, which is supposed to be responding to our constituents. We just had a presidential debate where 2 people talked to us about wanting to listen to our constituents, right? So I am trying to do my best to listen to what constituents wanted, which is that they want to receive early and frequent communication from their senators. What this bill is offering is early communication. It is not requiring often communication, but we've already had the bill that I believe it was Senator Stahl who brought the bill incentivizing that second meeting. So we're moving in a baby steps direction toward that goal. And until we have a new strategic plan, which sources new data from all of our constituents, the best we can do is try to honor what constituents told us with the data that we currently have. Thank you for the question.
Joshua, go ahead.
Joshua Bakita, computer science. So this is less of a question and more of a comment on the bill. I would encourage all the senators here to consider voting on this positively on this legislation. I know that it may be imperfect, but the code can be easily amended. This requirement can be removed. If nobody has held their town hall by the time, or 10% of people have held their town hall by 90 days in, we'll just remove it. This is not, we're not going to precipitate some catastrophe by passing this. And Kendall has made an excellent point and has worked on this for years now. And so I'd really call on senators to consider attempting this requirement. And if it's too much, we can change it. We've changed plenty of requirements before, but this is something that our constituents have asked for, and I think we should give it a try.
Thank you. And to, if I can comment on your comment, you'll notice that the way it's scrolled, I can't quite see, but I think it's section 1, the proposed code amendments. Yeah, that's perfect, Katie. Thank you. What you'll notice is that the first struck subsection of this code, which is current code, right? So what you're seeing is that this bill proposes to strike a current requirement that's already on the books that says that you need to turn in your town hall report 72 hours after you host the town hall meeting. I don't know of anyone who's been denied their allocation for not having done that. So while I'd like to see something put on the books and holding senators accountable to things on the books, as the senator from computer science says, like, the code is quite malleable, so we can choose to change things. And yes, this is an experiment. It will be uncomfortable while we try it, but our senators or our constituents have asked us to do this, and we owe it to them to try.
Great. Do we have any other questions? Going once? Going twice? All right. Thank you so much, Kendall, for introducing that and working on this. Third time is the charm. Okay. We'll now move on to, what is it? Sorry. We'll now move on to 54-023, appropriations request for January. And Senator Stahl, if you want to introduce this.
Yes, so this is our regular monthly appropriations bill, except it's not entirely regular this year or this month. So this month we actually got a super high amount requested. So we had over $21,000 worth of requests for this cycle. And out of that, as you can see, we funded just over $16,000. So we were able to fund 9 out of 10 of our applicants. You've heard me say in past meetings that in my time on the committee, we've never not funded someone. And sadly, during this meeting, we did choose to not fund one appropriation request. And that was simply because we actually ran out of funds in our budget, which you're going to hear more about later. So I have invited that group from BSA to apply again in our next cycle if we are approved for more funds into our budget. But it's not a good place. We don't like to cut people's requests. So we are really hoping that you will be considerate of our bill that's coming up in just a few minutes. And I'm happy to take any questions.
I saw Joshua's hand first, so Joshua, go ahead.
Joshua Bakita, computer science. So normally we don't have a lot of discussion on these bills, but I have some hesitancy here about a number of these items I'd like to ask about. So items 1, 2, and 4 in this table here are 3 different conferences. One for, I believe, is affiliated with law, although it's not stated there. That's what that organization is affiliated with. Then 2, I believe, that are affiliated with the School of Public Health. The amounts here seem somewhat staggering. $8,000 for a venue for a conference that publicly says they have about 500 people, and many of those are not students, seems quite questionable. Renting the entire union for 3 days costs much less than that. So I was curious if you could please clarify a little bit why graduate students need to pay. I mean, we're talking about $2. We're allocating in this bill about $2 for every single graduate student on campus. And one of those dollars is going to this minority health conference's venue. And I was curious if you could particularly shed light on that, as well as the pharmacy summit that's also for professionals and is in Asheville, and then a law conference that is normally local, and they're requesting money for transportation and lodging. This all seems very unusual.
Riley, I think I can, since I have all the notes and whatnot, I think I can answer that if you're okay with that. Cool. So for transportation and lodging, that is for the conference on race, class, gender, and ethnicity. That is for their keynote speakers. They actually have 12 speakers, and I think are only really paying for like 4 transportation and lodging. Everyone else is local, like you said. And then the Asheville summit, that technically is a professional group and a UNC campus, a UNC Chapel Hill campus. They just host it in Asheville for the Asheville students out there. But it is also hybrid for the UNC Chapel Hill local people as well that don't want to make the drive. And then the Minority Health Caucus for $10,000. We also had a lot of discussion on this. They have asked for $10,000 for the past 3 or 4 years. And we know that that is a lot. They are going into the Friday Center, and we've asked them why they haven't searched for a cheaper venue, and they say it's due to the amount of people that they are hosting at this conference, which was about 600 people this year. And so we actually, or maybe attended by around 600 is, I think, their prediction. They actually have to cap registration because they are starting to outgrow their space as well. So we decided that because they are capping their registration and number of people attending, that we were going to decrease their allocation based on the actual number of attendees. And they've also mentioned to us that their outside funding is less compared to previous years. So while they've asked for the same amount for the previous years, we still could, like you said, could not justify giving them the entire $10,000.
Thank you. Further follow-up, if I may?
Sure.
Yeah. So are we clear on what percentage of attendance at these 3 events will be graduate students at UNC from UNC?
We do always, or at least I try and always ask that as well when we are talking to these people who are bringing up these. And we do, in most cases, adjust the allocation based on how many graduate students are attending, graduate and professional students, I should say. Yes. With that being said, does not look like I, this time, wrote it down in my notes.
I can speak to that, Senator Paquita. Thank you for the great questions. One thing that I will add, just to maybe alleviate some of your concerns, is that these portions of their budgets that you're looking at do not reflect nearly the entire cost of the events. So I believe for the first event, the Conference on Race, Class, Gender, and Ethnicity, the total budget for that event is around like $76,000. And so they asked us for $4,000 of that. So I don't feel like we're really, overstating the importance that graduate students will play in that event. Same for the Asheville Summit. That event will actually have entrance fees for all the pharmacy professionals that will attend. So students, they do have to pay some sort of admittance fee, I believe, but it's much less. And all the professionals pay, I think, $100 or $200 to attend that conference. So that's where the extra funds are coming from to put that conference on.
Senator Winter, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Senator Winter, Musicology. I too am very troubled by the amounts that are being spent in a single cycle on these events that are not strictly serving our graduate and professional student communities. I want to draw the Senate's attention to something that the chair of this committee has said, that the committee has never denied a request. And I don't know that that is the most prudent management of funds, especially when this same Senate expects that fewer than half of travel awards applicants every month are successful. So I just wanted to throw that out there for our consideration, not only on this bill, but also on the late addition to the agenda, which is requesting $35,000 from our reserves to help fund or to help replenish the appropriations budget, which is looking like it's going to be depleted. Thanks.
Thank you for that point, Senator Winter. One thing that I want to say is, appropriations has been very fortunate to be able to at least partially fund every event that we've seen so far. I feel like our committee, as well as every other committee, we have a responsibility to uphold the code and make sure that funds are spent in the correct way, but we don't really have subjective input on the type of events we fund or the amount that people ask us for. So we really try to keep our opinions out of it, and we try to serve the graduate students of this university as faithfully as possible. So that's what we're looking at with this bill. One thing that I want to note is the Senate has the power to overrule the Appropriations Committee if you feel necessary with a 2/3 majority vote. So if anyone has a problem with that, I'm happy for someone to call that vote into question if you see necessary.
Yeah, go ahead back there.
Shriti Pant, Maternal and Child Health. Just to give a different perspective of it, I'm also a speakers co-chair for the Minority Health Conference, and to give a Gillings perspective, a lot of every single class in Gillings usually advertises this conference to the grad students, as well as letting us have excused absences from our classes that are happening at that time. So a lot of the times, these graduate students, this is the most frequented by UNC grad students to a conference in the year. So I think this money also helps fund all the numbers that does go back to providing, students.
Great. Are there any other questions or comments? Joshua, do you want to come back? Unless I don't think I see that.
Yeah, Joshua McKee, computer science. I had a follow-up. Riley, in the question I'd asked about, do you know the percentage of students at these events? It was the answer that we don't know how many graduate students will be at these events.
Correct. Yes. So we don't have a number figure for any of these events, but if people from the pharmacy school, law school, or Gillings would like to speak to that, they're more than welcome to.
Anything else? Kendall, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Do we know how much money from or what the total budgets are for these events, and how many other contributors they have, and what amounts have been contributed by those other groups? And I'm sorry to speak in sort of generalizations, but we do have 3 events that are rather costly in front of us.
So yes, each organization does submit their total budget to us for the event, and then the amount that they request from GPSG. So as I mentioned, the first event, the Conference on Race, Class, Gender, and Ethnicity, I do remember that event's total budget was over $70,000, and they requested $4,000 from us. I believe for the Minority Health Conference, that could have been a majority of their budget that they were requesting from GPSG. And then from the Asheville Summit, it was not even close, because as I mentioned, all of the professionals that they have coming in will pay an admittance fee.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other questions, we will move on from discussion for that bill, and we will now move on to 54-024, which is the resolution calling on the university to not hold classes on election day. Senator Ben King, do you want to introduce this?
Yeah, so like the title says, this resolution calls on the university to not hold classes on election day. It's pretty straightforward. In the whereas clauses, I provided some statistics, one of them being 66% of the American public supports creating a federal election holiday. Let's see. There was something interesting I found. Let's see. A couple years ago, the UNC Academic Calendar Committee passed a calendar which included a holiday on election day, but when it made it to the chancellor's office, it was removed from the final calendar. So this is something that the school has the power to do, but the previous chancellor chose not to do. I'll read the section 1 sort of meat of the resolution, and then I can answer any questions. The University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill is duty bound to implement a policy wherein classes are not held on North Carolina primary election days, North Carolina general election days, and Chapel Hill Carrboro municipal election days, allowing students the necessary time and flexibility to exercise their right to vote and actively participate in the democratic process. And then in the section 2, I've included sort of the general folks we send these to, but I've included the calendar committee on there as well. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right, we'll move to discussion. Are there any questions or comments from anyone in the room or on Zoom?
Hi, Alice Woolard in bioinformatics. So I want to speak into support of this. I work on the election day. I'm a precinct chair for my district in Orange County, and I know a few other people who work during the election or volunteer or are precinct judges like myself. So I want to support this as well, along with some of those statistics that Senator King mentioned. A lot of Americans do report that they would be more likely to vote if they had time off to do so, but they don't have that opportunity now.
Anyone else?
Hi, good evening. Duncan McLean, Physics and Astronomy. I'm the chair of the SOGAPS committee. We took a look at this resolution and we recommended it unanimously at the time that we took our vote. I'd very much encourage senators to consider voting positively on this legislation because we saw in the last election in 2023, what just can happen in terms of a local election in the town of Chapel Hill when people come out and vote with the election of Theodore Noller to the town council. And, in this environment where the UNC at Chapel Hill is sending mass emails encouraging people to register to vote, it seems unreasonable that given the precedent where other public universities are creating holidays and not holding classes on election days, that UNC would not do the same. So in the absence of General Assembly action to declare a state holiday on election day, we believe that calling on the university to do this would be a locally reasonable substitute. So I would encourage you to consider voting positively. Thank you.
Sure.
I will add, Alice made a good point earlier, but this year's primary election falls on March 5th, which is actually when our next Senate meeting is scheduled. So maybe we could give some thought to moving that meeting. I know it's something we don't have to talk about now, but we're talking about elections.
We can talk about that.
So I figured I'd bring it up, but thank you all for your questions and comments.
All right, thank you, everyone. We will now move on to 54-025. An act to create a representative for postdocs in the Graduate and Professional Student Senate. I guess I am the author of this, so I will introduce it. This is a bill, those of you that were in Senate last year will recognize that this bill as something that was discussed to add representation for postdocs in GPSG Senate. we decided to sort of change that bill, make some significant changes to the way that we are basically designing the position. And it's this bill proposes to create a position called a postdoctoral representative unit that then appoints a postdoctoral representative that will function similarly to a senator, but is distinct from a senator in that they are unable to ask for or determine how to allocate funds, as postdocs do not pay graduate student fees, but it will allow them to have a voice in the room in GPS Senate. And as a lot of postdocs have very similar concerns at the university as graduate and professional students, and that they don't currently have representation on any other council, including faculty council at UNC. Yeah, so we can take questions if there are any questions from the room. I will. I would like to recognize a member of. I'm going to need a motion to this, but I would like a motion to be able to recognize a postdoc who has come to the meeting to speak in favor of the bill. Do I have a motion to allow him to be recognized? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Are there any objections? All right, that motion will pass by unanimous consent. And please go ahead and if you want to talk a little bit.
Hi all, my name is David. I'm from the physics department. I represent the Postdoctoral Association at UNC. Some of you may remember me. I made the argument why we should have a postdoctoral representative unit at the Senate last year. I think it was around May. And together with Katie, basically, I also worked on this bill, but mainly she's the author. And the main purpose of this bill is basically, as she already mentioned, having postdocs recognized, basically let them have an official voice at the Senate level, because a lot of the issues that postdocs face at universities, also basically similar issues that the graduate students face. This will give us an official representation to basically voice our issues and collaborate to find solutions together. And let me know if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time to be here. I appreciate it. Are there any questions or comments from anyone or anyone on Zoom? Joshua, go ahead.
Joshua Bakita, computer science. So this bill seems like it threads a very sort of squiggly path to try and create a representative that can't really be a representative because they're not a graduate student. And so I have a few questions about some of those things. I have some concerns generally about the difficulty in running a meeting where you're having to count votes and make sure that you always treat have to make these judgments about what they're allowed to vote on, what they're not allowed to vote on, how they behave. I'm personally still in the support of just giving them speaking privileges, as we do to, for example, the student body president. But I'm in particular curious about the section that allows them to vote on some general bills. What general bills do not relate to funding or the governance documents for funding, which are the code?
Can you point to the section so I can see exactly?
Yes, it says they may.
Inbox. You'd be like, whoa, 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 something is
can you
going
please
on
mute?
right now. Right? Dana?
Yeah, we also talked about how it could be like hard to reach.
Person on Zoom, please mute yourself.
Like, I don't know how feasible.
Great.
Thank you. The section that says they can vote on general bills that do not relate to funding, what are bills that are general that don't relate to funding in some way?
That's a good question. I will say, I think my intention with that was to leave it open so that I think it was to leave it open to the interpretation of the situation. I think that, I guess my thinking was that if it was, let's say, a section of the code that affected like this section of the code that affects for example, the selection of postdoctoral representative, that section of the code, and therefore that bill does not inherently affect the way that money is allocated. And so it would be dependent upon the section of the code that's being edited. Because I guess the code has a lot to do other than things than with the way that our money is allocated. I'm open to changing language. I think it was that was to me the easiest way to sort of leave the door open, but not too wide. Sure, go ahead.
An additional question, if I may. Are postdocs not represented by the employee forum?
I'm not sure. Do you know by chance?
Oh, as far as I know, the answer is no. The only representation for the officially that postdocs have, because we're not a full-time employee, we're basically on a year or 2 year contract, depending on the PI. So our official representation comes, I guess, not official representation. There's an Office of Postdoctoral Affairs that they manage us, but it's not an actual representation. And then the Postdoctoral Association is made off of postdocs who basically volunteer to work in the association and represent the postdocs in a way.
So follow up on something that was mentioned there. The bill requires that the postgraduate representative must be a full-time employee of UNC Chapel Hill. And if postdocs are not, then does that provision not cause a problem?
That's a good question. Maybe that is an error in my language. First paragraph. Yeah, I see. I am open to a motion to edit that to be for clarity. I think that was just me thinking they're it's not fully enrolled either. They are fully a postdoc was what I meant with that language. So I'm open to a motion to edit that if you have one.
I'll motion to strike full-time from the bill and just say a PR must be an employee of the university holding a postdoctoral position.
Yeah, I consider that friendly.
Second.
I don't think we need to do, it's friendly, so we just add it. But thanks for being on top of it. Brian, go ahead.
Just a point about employee forum. There are actually a lot of positions on campus that do not have representation. So for example, any temp staff worker that's on campus is not considered an employee. They're actually considered an entity that's not managed by the university, but by a different part of the system. So lots of employees across campus actually don't have representation on campus.
Awesome, thank you. Are there any other comments on this bill? Going once, going twice, nothing on Zoom. All right, we will continue. Thank you, everyone. We are flying. I appreciate the succinctness here. Okay, we will now move on to 54-026, which is the Act 2 Fund Travel Awards for Cycle 5, closed January 27th, 2024. Nick, if you would be so kind to introduce this.
Yep, absolutely. This is our usual travel bill. We received 18 applications this cycle. On those 18 applications, we decided to fund 8 of them, defer 2 of them, and not award 8 of them. So, Katie, I don't know if you want to scroll down at all. Yep, here's our remaining budget. So based on our $35,000 allocation, we're spending $3,000 this month. And we have $10,000 remaining for the last 2 cycles. However, if the Senate would like to appropriate me more money, I'd be more than happy to take it as well. But with that in mind, I think we're going to try and stay within our $10,000 that we have remaining in the budget. And I'm happy to take any questions. All right.
All right, thank you. Good stuff. Okay, we will now move on to 54-027, which is the Appropriations Committee Reallocation Bill. Who is the author here? Riley, you're the author, so you can go ahead and introduce this bill.
Yes, so as alluded to earlier, this is a bill that is requesting the GPSG to allocate $35,000 from the general reserve to our appropriations budget. I commend Travel Awards Committee for their great effort on staying in budget. Our committee has chosen, as I mentioned earlier, to fund as many groups as possible. And in my opinion, and sitting on this committee for 2 years now, I honestly believe that committees like appropriations and travel awards are the best use of GPSG funds. GPSG is funded by graduate student fees, and we have a responsibility to give those fees back to them in whatever way we can. So I'm not shy about this request. It's not a random number though. So we actually had our vice chair, Rob, he crunched the numbers and found that last year from February to April, we received $35,000 in requests. Not all of those were funded, but as you can see from the chart in Appendix A, the requests have seen a steady increase since COVID, and we expect that increase to continue. So this is just a projection, the $35,000, we think we can definitely make it work. But obviously if we don't receive $35,000 worth of requests, all of that money will then go back into the reserve fund. The reserve fund that this is pulling from currently has over $190,000 in it. I heard from Katie during the finance committee meeting that I believe it only needs to have $60,000 in it per our requirements. So we're way above that. You know, what better way to spend it than to give it straight back to our graduate students? Yeah, I'm happy to take any questions anyone has. Just want to note it was unanimously recommended by the finance committee. So.
Great. Are there any questions about this bill? Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, Nick Melosi, Health Policy and Management. I would second Riley on this one. As much as travel has tried to stay within our budget, we also get a slew of applications that are, I would say, low effort by a lot of people in what they're doing, despite us having the rubric posted. I think in the Appropriation Committee's case, they're definitely getting larger applications that fund more and more people on it, and I wouldn't be shy on helping, you know, improve this. So, I mean, I guess the question that I would have to you directly, Senator Stahl, on this one is, do you feel $35,000 is enough? Do you feel that, you know, with the historical trends that you have presented here, that you'd be able to fund all the applications that you're expecting to get in the next 2 months? Or do you suppose that, you know, you're going to still have to turn people away?
Thanks for that question. I don't necessarily see it being an issue, but if any senator wants to motion to increase $35,000, that will be taken as friendly.
Right, I saw a hand over here and I'm not sure who it was. Maybe not? Okay. Oh, okay, go ahead. You got it.
Hansham Economics. I'm trying to answer it myself while going through the budget, but it's pretty confusing. Where does that put us? Maybe the finance folks can tell us. Where does that put us in terms of budget deficit? I know we were supposed to run a deficit, but where does that put the deficit at for this year?
So, sorry, Stephen Wright, Vice President for Finance. So with this 35,000, we crunched the numbers. This would still be well within our requirement to maintain at least 1/3 of our total revenue year to year from the student fees. I think this would still leave us with like $95,000 in that kind of leeway area. So even with a slight increase to this beyond 35,000, we would still be fine.
Great. I think I saw Kendall's hand first.
Hi, Kendall Winter, Musicology. My question is for our VP of Finance and for the chair of the Finance Committee, if they're in the room. I'm wondering what a request like this, if fulfilled, is going to do for your annual budget planning, which we expect to see from you all in April for next year.
Yes, so if this was approved, we would definitely incorporate either an expected request of a similar value into the next year's budget, or go ahead and budget it in from the beginning. If this, as the numbers show, is the trend that we're seeing.
Okay, do you have current projections for what our fee revenue is going to be for next year? And if the technique is going to be to try to incorporate a larger appropriations budget from the outset, where do you think you might draw from, right? Because we currently have a balanced budget. So if we're going to increase appropriations and we're not going to see a huge spike in our revenue coming in through student fees, what would get cut in order to accommodate that increase in this area if it's part of the annual budget?
So we're still working out those numbers right now is in terms of our current projections. So I don't have an answer for you right at this time, but I will try to get back to you on that as soon as I can.
Okay, thank you.
Joshua, go ahead.
Yeah, so I can speak as the former finance chair. With this amendment, we will be if this were to pass, we will have spent $40,000 out of reserves. So this would be funding in excess of what we're bringing in, or spending in excess of what we're bringing in on appropriations. Since the GPSG code does require a balanced budget, there's unfortunately not really any way to sustain more than an annual budget of approximately $25,000 for the year for appropriations, without increasing our fee revenue or finding alternative sources of funding. But we do have a large reserve balance. And so this is arguably one of the best ways to sort of competitively spend the money.
Great. Anyone else? Okay. That'll end discussion on 5427. Thank you, everyone. We will now move to our last bill, 54-028, which is financial assistance for spring 2024 general elections bill.
Yeah.
Joel, are you here? Oh, perfect. Go ahead.
Yep,
Sorry.
I'm here. Yep. Hi, everyone. So I am the author of this bill, co-sponsored with Senator Kalisa Strauss. And during our finance committee yesterday, we received an inquiry from the Board of Elections requesting for $850 to support the general elections campaign, which is to occur this February of 2024. And the main purpose of the funding request would be to support initially it was supposed to support food as well as merchandise and giveaways. Now we did push back and modified the request such that we would be happy to support food because the undergraduate student government isn't able to fund or sponsor any food related items for an event. And so that being said, GPSG were asking that we'd be willing to give $200 towards the event, and it would be a 4-day event throughout the month of February. And all we ask is that with the $200 that the Board of Elections table inconvenient spaces where graduate and professional students can participate and vote in the general elections. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Any questions? Just to
Making it
clarify,
easy.
yeah,
Okay.
we said
Oh, go ahead.
$200, which is going to be about $50 per day. and they had requested to purchase cookies and donuts. So $50 for 4 days for cookies and donuts. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thanks everyone. We have managed to make it to the end of legislation.
I'd like to make a motion to return to the postdoctoral bill. There are a number of typos.
We already ended discussion on the bill without a motion.
But this is a motion to return to discussion.
I hear an objection. Okay.
There has to be a second
Is,
first.
thank you. Is there a second for the motion? Hearing none, the motion fails. All right, we will continue on with our agenda. Okay, we are now going to go ahead, I believe, and open up the ballot. Luke, are you good with that? Okay. And we are also going to move into the next section of our meeting, which is going to be the student body presidential forum. Yes. Sorry, we're getting hour 3. I'm starting to lose it a little bit. Yes.
Would folks be amenable to a 5-minute recess as we get set up for the next forum, just to give folks an opportunity to use the bathroom and stretch their legs? We've already been here for 2 hours.
I need 5 minutes anyway to reset the tables. So I'm totally fine with 5-minute recess for drinks and bathroom. We are going to go ahead and open the ballot, however. So 5 minutes, we'll be back at 7:44.
Just to alert people, the doors seem to have automatically locked. So if you are going out, you might want to put something to prop it back up unless you have key access to this room.
I know we're in recess, but I just want to alert the election crew that 54-027 Appropriation Committee reallocation bill, at least in my ballot, appears twice, once without the title, once with the title.
I will check that right now. It looks like there was just an extra blank, so we will not consider whatever votes happen on that page. So just make sure you vote for it on the one that does include the title. All right, if I can have everyone take your seats, please. We are now back from our 5-minute recess. We're now going to move into our, yes, that's right, Student Body Presidential Forum. We have two wonderful candidates here with us today, and this is going to go very similarly to the forum that we had earlier in the night, and I am going to give the microphone to, oh, okay, we need a coin, but I'm going to give the microphone over to President Lauren Hawkinson to run this section of the meeting.
Thanks. Sorry, y'all. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We are really looking forward to chatting with you both. So we're going to do a coin flip to decide the order of opening statements. And then from there, we're just going to rotate back and forth with each question on who answers first. So as it is in the air, Laura, do you want to call it while it's up? Heads. So Laura, we'll start with you for your opening statement. You'll have 90 seconds to answer each question, and I will keep time and cut you off at 90 seconds.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me? Okay, beautiful. Well, my name is Laura Saavedra Forero, and I am a junior majoring in neuroscience. As you all probably saw, I'm in a wheelchair, and that has really influenced my experiences on campus. But typically, my experiences regarding accessibility are limited to physical infrastructure, and accessibility is so much more than that. Okay, there we go. On February 22nd of 2022, I think it's a meeting. Is this fine? Yeah, I think no? You hear me? Yeah. Okay. Should I start over?
You're good. I pause the time.
Okay. Perfect. Well, on February 22nd of 2022, I got stuck in my residence hall, and after a year of tireless efforts, and that includes meetings, conforming to the traditional, and emailing, using support systems that are already in place, making national news, none of our demands had been met, and therefore we moved on and planned a 32-hour direct action in front of South Building. And that was the first time when I got FaceTime with former Chancellor Kevin Guskowitz. And it made me realize how inaccessible our systems of power are to the students who are facing most of these issues. Additionally, and sort of moving forward, there was even with this election and the Board of Elections, a mishap where for 3 or 4 days, I was told that I had not made the ballot. And so I think this just shows how, due to systemic reasons, the people in power are not really accessible to the student body. I think that this is something that needs to change, and I think that I'm well equipped to do so. So
That's time.
let's force some change.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Taylor, and I'm a junior majoring in political science and media and journalism with a focus on advertising and public relations. And I'm running to be UNC's next student body president because I have so much love for this university and I've been given so much opportunities here. But I also recognize that there's cracks and gaps in our systems. I stepped into UNC during a unique and challenging time in which there was a mental health crisis on our campus. There's been several attacks on diversity. We've dealt with problems facing accessibility as well as food insecurity on our campus. And so I think this past year, serving as the undergraduate student body secretary, I've gotten the cool opportunity to connect with so many clubs and student organizations and hear their concerns. But the problem is that a lot of times these students aren't able to advocate for themselves and get to people like administrators, board of trustees, and faculty. And so I'm running on a platform called Our Home, Our Future, Our Carolina, that acknowledges that this place is our home, but that we also want to make it a better place for our future selves and for future generations to come.
Thank you. We have 2 prepared questions that we're going to go through, but I do want to invite everyone in the room and on Zoom. You can scan the QR code and submit questions for our student body president candidates, which will follow the 2 prepared questions. So we'll start first question with Jalea. Graduate and professional students are different from undergraduate students. What are your top priorities in advocating for graduate and professional students to ensure their needs are being met across campus?
I think the first thing is that a lot of graduate students aren't represented on our campus. Graduate students make up roughly 11,000 of our student body, but they're not represented at places like the Board of Trustees. And I know that's a question that we're going to go into later today, but I think this representation is key. I've spoken with people like Lauren Hawkinson, and she's also mentioned that mental health is a big thing on in the graduate side, and graduate students are facing mental health crises. And I think a lot of times is that graduate students don't feel like this is a place for them. There's lots of resources for them, but a lot of times it's not communicated to them that they're available for them. So I think understanding that one, graduate students need to be represented here. They need to be represented at places like the Board of Trustees, but also two, that representation is key in making them feel like they can use our services and that they are available for them.
Thank you. Laura?
I think just starting off by saying that, graduate students are already doing so much of this work. There are governing bodies of its own, and also, tireless advocates on this side of campus. So I think what's necessary is to get these folks in the right spaces. And I feel like that is where, without involving the Board of Trustees, I can leverage the position of student body president to ensure that these connections are being made, that the people in power are getting to hear directly from graduate students, rather than pretending to know what the experience of being a graduate or professional student is like. One of the biggest problems that I was made aware of through my time as campus-wide co-presidency is the lack of, a living wage for graduate students. And so I and my campaign firmly align with the demands of UE 150 from repealing the Jim Crow Collective Bargaining Act to ensuring that the living wage is met. So that's $3,200 a month. And I think that a lot of this commitment lies in ensuring that student wellness is prioritized, because the mental health crises and what we saw after our shooting is clearly reflected in many areas of campus. This is an intersectional issue that deserves an intersectional approach.
Thank you. Laura, we'll start with you for this question. Student representation on the Board of Trustees is limited to 1, and potential expansion is non-negotiable with the board. Previous attempts to gain GPSG president access to closed sessions of the Board of Trustee meetings has also been shut down. This lack of representation from both student constituencies at the BOT level is then reflected across campus and the UNC system. That being said, would you support legislation at the student government level and at the Board of Trustees to alternate student representation on the Board of Trustees between the highest level undergraduate and graduate student leader? Why or why not?
So I'm sure you all know that a graduate student has never been student body president. And so if the decision of the graduate student, while we make the system more accessible, is to alternate, then yes, I would support it, because we need to make sure that graduate students are getting heard, as they represent 30% of our student population. I don't think that's necessarily the best solution, but I do acknowledge that in the process of actually making student government more accessible and access to the Board of Trustees, that might need to be a temporary solution. With that being said, graduate students are open to run for student body president, and there should be graduate students up here with us. But the way that the campaign and the structure is run, it shows that it's not meeting the needs of graduate students, whether it's because the system itself, the benefits that are provided in the role are not in alignment with the needs of graduate and professional students. That might be one of the biggest problems. And so ensuring that spaces where student government is actively doing work are actually made accessible and brought to the graduate side of campus, I think is crucial and something that needs to happen.
Thank you. Sure. Would you support legislation at the student government level and at the Board of Trustees to alternate student representation on the Board of Trustees between the highest level undergraduate and graduate student leader? And why or why not?
Yes, I would absolutely support legislation at the student government level and at the Board of Trustees level to ensure that graduate students are represented. Just in my time alone working with the current student body president, Christopher Everett, I've really learned how he's had this cool relationship with the current graduate student government president, Lauren Hawkinson, and how he's really made an effort to fill her in on those meetings. And while that's been a really fruitful process for them, I think that a graduate student definitely 1000% deserves to be at the Board of Trustees meetings. I think things like fair compensation for graduate students, TAs, research assistants, and also being able to advocate for mental health for graduate students should be advocated by a graduate student. So I think that is very necessary so that graduate students can feel heard and welcome. I know it was even last year that because of the work of graduate student government president Theodore Noller, that they were able to increase the graduate stipends by, I think it was over 200%. So it went from $17,000 a year to $20,000 a year. And that work was done with people like university administrators and Board of Trustees. And I think that just shows the impact of a graduate student body president and how they really do need to be in the rooms. I also think that currently in the search for the new chancellor, that graduate students haven't been a part of that experience. The only student that sits on the search committee is—
That's time. Thank you both. We'll move into questions from the audience now. We'll start with you, Julia. How do you plan to work with campus leadership to work towards a solution to prevent further gun violence on our campus?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. In our policy, we have been advocating for locks on all doors as well as accessible language. And the work has already started with the current undergraduate student government executive branch. I think it's really prevalent that there's lots of emotions going on as to what gun control and safety measures look like going forward. I think with all the Alert Carolina messaging, it really scared a lot of students. And so their emotions are valid and should be heard by the student body. I think when it comes to working with university administrators, that one, doing this outreach to different student organizations is really important and is really key, but also making sure that graduate students are a part of the process. I think it's very easily that student government has only reached out to undergraduate groups, but we should definitely be reaching out to graduate student groups to get their insight when it comes to lockdowns and how the university should move forward with safety on campus.
Thank you.
Yeah, clearly gun violence is a pervasive problem in the United States. And so I think that first and foremost, the idea of lobbying and making student government very clear on their stance of the necessity for gun control is crucial. I think that, a lot of times people prefer neutrality in instances of controversial areas or knowing the influence of the NRA in our NC legislature. But I think that this is affecting all of us and needs to be made very clear, because as student body president, my priority is the well-being of all students, and that means the safety of all students. I also think that, we need to be proactive instead of reactive. We realize so many flaws in the system after our active shooting situation. And so we need enhanced lockdown protocols that are accessible to all students, protocols that include disabled students, that include folks who don't speak English, like our workers. And therefore, I think that being proactive instead of reactive will allow us to better prepare while we work to ensure that tangible change is made.
Thank you. Laura, we'll start with you on this one. Given that UNC partially funds Chapel Hill Transit, a service that students rely on every day, how might you use your position to push for more frequent and reliable bus service?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to add accessible to that, given the fact that I have rarely, and I think since my time being in Chapel Hill, I've been able to use the bus system twice due to lack of accessibility. But I think that super crucial to leverage the importance of how this impacts the university's ability to function. I think that we need to make it clear of why it's a priority. I think that public transit overall is usually, siloed into the fact that it gets people to and from work, perhaps. But I think it's so much more than that. And without reliable public transportation, we're failing to serve so many individuals and community members. I think that this is something that needs to be discussed with the community. We cannot silo ourselves from the Chapel Hill community, which also is serviced by Chapel Hill Transit. And so I think that, like I said, being clear in these points and knowing the importance of them is what will allow us to, make our voice and our necessities very much adamant, clear, and heard.
Thank you. And would you be able to repeat the question again?
Sure. How might UNC partially funds Chapel Hill Transit, a service that students rely on every day? How might you use your position to push for more frequent and reliable bus service?
Yeah, I think that the bus system is something that literally so many UNC students rely on to get to and from various locations. And especially for graduate students, a lot of graduate students have to live farther from campus just because most of the on-campus locations or residence halls and apartments are catered to, that are closer to campus, are catered towards undergraduate students. So campus accessibility through bus transit is very important. I think when working with people like the Chapel Hill Town Council, there needs to be more of a relationship with these different bodies. Right now, our student body doesn't necessarily, we kind of live in a bubble and we don't necessarily interact with our elected officials who are kind of in control of these types of processes. So I think that we need to establish more collaboration and more networking with these different groups in order to ensure that there is more frequent busing systems and that they are reliable. I think too, there was originally an app called Translock that a lot of students use to rely on, but that since it's not out of date and isn't currently being used. So I think we also need to advocate for more apps so that students can feel like their bus system is reliable.
Thank you. And Julia, we'll start with you for this next question. How do you plan to support your opponent should you not be elected?
Yeah, I love that question because I think both of us have so much love for this university and we truly do want to see it change for the better. And if my opponent is elected, then I will absolutely be all for giving my policies and some of my platform initiatives to them because I think both of us really want to see that this university become better. And so ultimately, I have a vision for myself next year, but I also have a vision for the student body. And so I think that there's ways in which we can both come together and work on our goals and visions for the student body and still collaborate, even though both of us won't be in those roles.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that supporting your efforts is crucial regardless of the outcome, because I think that we have similar values. I think where we kind of differ is on our approach, perhaps, of how these things are achieved. But I think that if it comes down to the values and we align there, then I am willing to provide all of my knowledge, my connections, my effort, my perspective. I also think that perspective and who's in the room is something that we both value significantly. And clearly you have experience within the system. And so, I'm willing to work in whatever that looks like, whether it's, within the system or outside of the system, depending on who's elected.
Thank you. Laura, I'll start with you for this one. It's a yes or no question, but I'm gonna add a little piece to the end. Yes or no? Have you attended a GPSG Senate meeting before?
No.
Have you attended any GPSG meetings before tonight?
No.
How do you plan on connecting with graduate students if you are elected?
Yeah, I think that my experience, and this also applies to undergraduate, has been outside of student government. It's been on the ground, more so of a grassroots approach, particularly because the spaces that I occupy on campus tend to revolve around social justice. Like I said, I got to spend basically a year working with UE 150 on graduate student demands and also working with our housekeepers. Also through the Latinx Leadership Alliance, I've been able to engage with a lot of our graduate and professional students there. I'm a part of SHAC, which is run by our graduate students. And so it's really been these connections outside of student government, because student government hasn't always felt accessible to me, that I've been able to reach and listen to and hear the needs and the wants of the graduate and professional student body. With that being said, I also think that it is important to try and make the space more open and more accessible and realize who's not in the room and why they're not in the room.
Thank you. Julia, same questions, yes or no. Have you attended a GPSG Senate meeting before?
No.
And have you attended any GPSG meetings before tonight?
No.
And how do you plan to connect with graduate students should you be elected?
Yeah, I really like this question a lot because a lot more undergraduate students, especially those that are in student government, should be making an effort to come to these events. So I think going forward, undergraduate students that are involved in student government should just be at these types of meetings because it's important, especially being that a lot of the representation is held with the undergraduate students. But I will say that I have made an effort, especially throughout this process, and knowing that if elected, I will be working with graduate students and representing graduate students. I have really made an effort to reach out to different organizations and different students that do sit within this body. A few have been Rob Gerald, that serves in the Graduate Senate and is also a part of the law school. I've also connected with the Black Law Student Association, the Student Bar Association, as well as the Director of Health and Wellness in the executive branch of the graduate student government. So I think I'm not really worried about connecting with graduate students next year because I have been doing the work to connect with them. And I think that filling in everybody from the opposite constituency, including the new graduate student government president, will be key into making sure that these relationships continue.
Thank you. We've got 2 questions left. So Julia, what reforms to the election and campaign process would you like to see?
Yeah, I think for a lot of students that are interested in running for these different positions, especially from marginalized groups, don't really know how to go about it. I mean, when I ask the average student if they've heard about the student government elections, most of the time the answer is no. And if they have heard about it, it's because they might have a friend that's running. So I think with the change that needs to be made to the Board of Elections and the rules is just making it a lot more accessible and letting students know that anybody can run for these positions and represent the student body, especially at the Senate level, especially at the student body presidential level. And so I think a way we go about doing that is personalizing all these branches of student government that we have. A lot of students don't feel like they can approach student government members. So that means using things like social media and TikTok and all those good resources to make student government members seem personable so that other students feel like they can get involved in the process.
Thank you.
Yeah, my process with the Board of Elections has been very flawed. Like I mentioned, for 3 to 4 days, I was told that I had not made the ballot, and then it was an error in the way in which the votes were counted, where I was informed, or everyone was informed yesterday, that I had made the ballot. And so I think that the system is fundamentally flawed and not necessarily serving everybody, which is our entire student body. I think that something that needs to happen that's tangible is making it clear what the incentives are of running. I think that some folks are not going to be able to run for an office if it means that there is no stipend or there is no pay. And that is not transparent or clear. And so I think that needs to be made a priority. Also, I mean, the Taylor administration has a lawsuit against the Board of Elections right now to try and get me to not appear on the ballot. And so I think that the way in which the process is run right now is also limiting access and has pillars in place where candidates can do that to limit access.
Thank you. Last question. Laura, can you speak to your qualifications and the experiences and skills that you would bring to this office?
Yeah, of course. I will say that first and foremost, my personal experience on this campus as a disabled student has prepared me for what I need for this role. I, since the moment stepped foot on this campus, have been forced to be an advocate. And though this was, not something I had in the plans when I first came in, reflecting back on the process, I have unintentionally been preparing for this moment and for this role since the day I got to school, as an advocate for myself and for various communities. And with that being said, so I think that's like adaptability and resilience. I think that leading in a large organization like the Campus Y, which has over 25 committees under it and has both like a student and a staff component of it, helped me really learn how to manage a team effectively and be able to prioritize people's strengths in order to get things done. And also knowing that approaches can change, but that the values stay the same, because my values are a commitment to all of you, both in my platform and as I'm speaking here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to address a comment made earlier about the Taylor administration suing the Board of Elections to get another candidate off the ballot. The Taylor administration has always been about having a fair election. And so I think every person has been given the training mechanism, which is that they had to get a certain amount of signatures by the deadline. And so our team was just ensuring that this process was fair and that no other candidates were collecting new signatures after the deadline. So that is why the lawsuit was in place. Two, about my experience that has made me qualified to run for this position. I currently serve as the undergraduate student body secretary. And so that has been a prominent role in which I've gotten a chance to learn a lot about the university and the administrations that are present and the different processes. And so I've already been doing this work that's been able to give me insight onto what this role will look like next year. And so in particularly as student body secretary and preparing for this role, I've met with over 40 different student organizations and really gotten a chance to connect with them and understand their concerns and their needs for the university. And so some of these concerns I wouldn't have learned about if I didn't connect with them. And so going into this next year as student body president, I'm excited to welcome diverse ideas and platforms and perspectives that I've learned from these different organizations that I've met from.
Thank you. That's all the time we have for questions. So I will invite you, Julia, to start with to close with your closing statement.
Yeah, thank you all again for allowing me to come into this space. I know you all don't see undergraduate students here often, and over the past 30, 40-ish minutes, you've all really got to connect with me and learn a little bit about my vision and my platform. But I want to just let you all know that I am a student, and this experience, I've had so many experiences that have been similar to you all, or some experiences that haven't been similar to you all. And so that me wanting to change the university has really inspired me to run. So when I think about my slogan, our home, our future, our Carolina, I think about how this place is our home, but we all have the power to impact it, to shape it for the better, which is our future, and leave behind a legacy that we'd like our future selves to see and future generations to come. And so with that being said, make sure to vote Julia Taylor for student body president on February 8th or 9th or February 14th. But again, super excited to get this going.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that the reason why I'm up here and why I decided to run is truly an act of radical love. And the campaign slogan is Radical Love on Wheels. And our 4 pillars are radical love, community care, collective healing, and accessibility. And so we've seen this theme of inaccessibility throughout this forum. And truly, as graduate and professional students make up 30% of this body, we need to make all systems of power, including those that are student run, more accessible to a greater number of people. I think with that being said, I am somebody who is committed and clear in my values and willing to, ensure that all of you feel represented and feel like you have a seat at the table, or that you literally have a seat at the table, because I'll bring you with me. And yeah, vote Laura Saavedra Forero for student body president. And thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much to both of our student body presidential candidates for being here tonight. Can we just have a round of applause for both? And I will hand things back over to Katie. Thank you both again for being here.
Awesome. Let us wrap up the meeting with just a couple of announcements. I'm going to give the mic immediately right back to Lauren for her GPSG president updates.
Perfect. Okay. Real quick, I spoke earlier and you heard Interim Chancellor Roberts talk about the graduate student experience initiative with the graduate school. We are trying, I serve on the steering committee for that, and we are trying very hard to get adequate representation from across campus to fill all of the spots on our subcommittees. And one space that we are still missing someone is someone who serves as a TA in the humanities to serve on that specific committee. So there's a committee for TAs in humanities, TAs in STEM, RAs humanities, RAs STEM, and where we're missing people is the TA for humanities. So if you are a TA for humanities and you're interested in serving on this subcommittee, please let me know. Or if you know someone who is a TA in the humanities who would be a great graduate student representative on this committee, please send them my way. Please consider returning to graduate and professional student government next year. Executive position applications will be opening in the next month. The president-elect is in charge of creating those applications and hiring the positions for cabinet and executive board, but there are also external appointments, senator, you can run for senator again, chair of the JGC. So there are many different ways to stay involved, and I would encourage all of you to continue to stay involved. I feel like there was one more thing that I needed to tell everybody, but we'll leave it there. Thank you all.
All right. I don't think Chris is here, right? Unless I don't. Okay. So we will skip over updates from student body president for tonight. We will go through really quickly updates from standing committee chairs. Let's start with O&A. Sorry, I just lost for a second.
Yeah.
O&A, go ahead.
Yes. So our committee meeting, last committee meeting focused on reviewing the midterm reports from both the executive branch, executive members, and our legislative committees. Generally, nothing of too much note to report. Everything seems to be running relatively smoothly now. We are, of course, missing one important midterm update from the VP of Finance, but that's supposed to be coming in soon based on some updates. They do have some issues with communications internally where they'd like some funding to help them purchase tools or something similar to that. So if they're looking for legislative support, please reach out to me if you're willing to provide some. Or them, reach out to them directly would be good. Abigail Rao, I think. Abigail Rao, yeah.
Yeah, I'll also mention to that. I think Abigna is finishing up compiling all of the mid-year reports. Or do you want to talk? Do you have something to say? Go for it. I think this is related.
I can talk. I wasn't prepared to talk, but I will. So yes, the entire report was presented to ONA, and we received a lot of really good feedback. And after Senate mid-year reports came in, I believe we're adding that to the large document that we already have. So at the March Senate meeting, I will have the full report ready to just be included along with all of the other documents that Katie usually posts on Canvas, so that if you all are interested, you can read through it just to be in the know about everything happening in the executive branch.
Awesome. It's really good. I read it. It's a fun read. Okay, we'll move to SOGAPs next.
Hello, Duncan McLean, chairperson of SOGAPs. SOGAPs met in January, and we worked on a couple of projects. The biggest one in terms of our individual time investment, our last meeting was working with Senator Ben King on the resolution, which was voted on tonight. We're very proud of that. We're also continuing to work with the executive branch on projects such as the Graduate Student Bill of Rights and on using some data to workshop legislation for improving campus safety and accessibility. We've also spent some time figuring out how we're going to go through all the town hall reports, which we're starting to see come in. We're expecting quite a few in the next month, and we've delegated work between committee members so we can get through those quickly and efficiently.
Great. Travel awards.
Kyle, McMurphy, HAM Chair Travel. I think I gave the majority of the update that I had, which was $10,000 remaining, and then sorry, it seems my camera's not working. I don't really have anything else to update, so if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
Awesome, thank you. Appropriations.
Yes, y'all have seen throughout the meeting what we've been up to in appropriations. Current balance is $0 in our account. I want to thank you all for your consideration on the 2 bills tonight. And the other thing that I want to mention is that I don't know where this information came from, but I've got an influx of senators emailing me to endorse their RUs or organizations application. I just want to let you all know that that does not impact our decision at all. If your name's on the application, we see it. So do not feel the need to email me with that endorsement. Thank you.
Awesome. Rules and Judiciary, I think. Yep.
So I'm the new chair of Rules and Judiciary. The previous chair announced that he was transferring, and I'm going to be stepping into that role. At our previous meeting, the bulk of the meeting consisted of looking at Katie's postdoc bill and Kendall's town hall bill. But yeah, I don't think we have anything else on the agenda for our next meeting yet, but I'm sure we'll be getting some bills sent our way.
All right, thanks. Finance. Oh, Joel told me that he's having internet problems and texted me his updates. Sorry. He said, reminder to all folks to submit your funding requests for town halls are due on February 23rd, which is very soon. So make sure you are submitting your request for funding for town halls very, very soon. Also, please, in your applications, include detailed and itemized budgets and budget justifications if you can. Is there anyone else in finance is there anything else you want to say? I think that's probably pretty good. Going once, twice. Okay, great. Okay, that is all the committee updates. As always, GPSG leadership updates, the updates for the executive branch are in the leadership updates that is in Canvas. So you can access those there. I have a couple of very fast announcements. Please do your town hall ASAP. Town hall funding requests are due February 23rd. Post town hall reports are due March 9th. And if you do not meet these, if you don't hit these dates, you will not be eligible for allocations at the end of the year. So please do that. If you are unsure what to do, if you're having a hard time, if you need help, please email me. We have a lot of resources and I'm super happy to help. As always, we have our YouTube channel has videos about how to do the town hall, and those workshops are available there. And we all have a lot of documentation in Canvas. So just please let me know if you need help. We are opening nominations for the Gwendolyn Harrison Smith Award, which is a award that GPSG runs that you nominate a graduate or professional student who's contributed to the greater graduate and professional student community. You can read more about it. I have a link to the Heal Life nomination form. Please consider nominating a student that you know that is deserving. I think the nomination is going to be open for a few weeks. And I will email you all when we get close to the deadline, but please consider if you know a graduate or professional student who you think would be deserving of this award. Other announcements, please continue to check in with your constituents to ensure, I gotta put my glasses back on, to ensure that you're accurately representing their needs. We have a get in touch page on our website, so feel free to send them there if they have feedback. The last announcement is Climate Action Day is coming up on March 7th in the pit. I wanted to mention this because I think that is going to be like right at our next Senate meeting. And I do believe that the committee running that is going to be asking for volunteers, and that volunteering will count for participation points if you're still looking for participation points. So put that on your calendar if that's something you might be interested in. I will be sending out more information. Lastly, elections are coming. Hopefully, we talked about this a lot today. Spring general elections are happening February 14th. GPSG presidential election or USG presidential election, depending on the constituency that's elected for student body president, will be happening on February 20th. And spring Senate elections for those units that have their elections in the spring will be happening on March 18th. So if you did your election registration form and that is what is selected for your unit, that is the date of that election. If you have not done your election registration form, please, please do it as soon as you can because we're getting close to the point where I can no longer make changes. Next Senate meeting, back in here on March 5th. More due dates for applications, results from our ballot voting.
Yes, everything passed. I'm happy to share by what margins if folks are interested, but I suspect we all kind of want to get out of here.
Great, thank you. Do I hear a call to adjourn? A motion?
Moved.
Great, do I hear a second? With no objections? Okay, at 8:24, we do adjourn. Thank you all so much. Good stuff. Thank you everyone on Zoom. I look forward to talking to you soon.
Hey, Katie. Can anyone hear me?